War is supposed to run on strategy, courage, and clear enemy lines. Some of history's bloodiest and strangest battles ran on none of those things. They ran on alcohol, poultry, a stolen wooden bucket, and a pig that never asked to be part of an international incident. Armies with cannons, warships, and machine guns still managed to lose to opponents who were never actually there, and the men who fought these battles left behind lessons far stranger than any victory. Austria, September 1788. The Habsburg Empire was at war with the Ottoman Empire, and a force of nearly 100,000 men had made camp near the Timus River, in what is now Romania. Hussars scouting ahead met a group of traveling Roma traders and bought barrels of schnapps with their own gold. They drank until they could not stand. Infantry units arriving later saw the drunken hussars and demanded a share of the alcohol. The hussars refused, and a scuffle broke out between men who were supposed to be marching in the same direction the next morning. Someone fired a shot into the dark, and in the confusion, entire regiments mistook each other for Ottoman cavalry. Officers screamed retreat in German, which some foreign-born recruits misheard as an enemy word entirely, and panic spread through the camp faster than any bullet ever could. By sunrise, close to 10,000 Austrian soldiers were dead or wounded. Cannons had been fired at shadows, cavalry had trampled their own supply wagons in the retreat, and Emperor Joseph II himself was reportedly thrown from his horse in the chaos and left in a ditch until morning. The Ottoman army arrived 2 days later to find a battlefield already littered with corpses. They had not fired a single shot. Historians still call it the Battle of Karansebes, a battle Austria lost entirely to itself, northern Italy, 1325. Bologna and Modena had hated each other for generations, over land, over pride, over old feudal loyalties that neither city could quite explain anymore. A raiding party from Modena slipped into Bologna one night and stole something from the town well: a single oak bucket, reinforced with iron bands. Bologna considered this an act of war. The city raised an army of roughly 32,000 men, determined to reclaim the bucket by force. Modena answered with fewer than 8,000 soldiers, led by exiled noblemen who had personal scores of their own to settle. At a place called Zappolino, the smaller Modenese force broke Bologna's massive army within hours, killing an estimated 2,000 men in a single afternoon over a piece of household equipment. Bologna's soldiers fled so fast that a folk saying survives to this day about running like they ran from Zappolino. Modena kept the bucket, refusing every diplomatic request for its return for the next several centuries. It still hangs in a bell tower in Modena's town center, a battered piece of oak behind glass. Nobody in 7 centuries has bothered to ask for it back a second time. The American Midwest, 1835. Ohio and the Michigan Territory both claimed a narrow strip of land containing the city of Toledo, and both governments called up their militias. Neither had fought a real war before. Neither was in a hurry to start one. For nearly a year, armed men from both sides marched through the disputed Toledo Strip, occasionally spotting each other across cornfields, and just as often turning around and going home for dinner. Michigan's governor, 24-year-old Stevens T. Mason, mobilized a militia of over 1,000 men. Ohio's governor mobilized roughly the same number, and for months the two forces mostly avoided each other on purpose, neither side eager to be first to draw blood over a swamp. The single documented casualty of the entire Toledo War was a Michigan sheriff's deputy, stabbed in the leg with a penknife during a scuffle over an arrest warrant. He survived. Congress eventually settled the dispute by giving Toledo to Ohio and handing Michigan a consolation prize instead, a swampy, forested peninsula nobody wanted at the time, dismissed by lawmakers as worthless frozen wilderness. That peninsula, the Upper Peninsula, turned out to hold some of the richest iron and copper deposits in North America, deposits that fueled American industry for the next century. Michigan lost a war it never really fought and won a fortune it never expected. The Pacific Northwest, June 1859. The United States and Britain had never formally agreed where the border ran through the San Juan Islands, and both nations had settlers living side by side on the same disputed ground. An American farmer named Lyman Cutler found a large black pig rooting through his potato patch. The pig belonged to the Hudson's Bay Company. Cutler shot it. British officials demanded Cutler's arrest. American settlers refused to hand him over. Within weeks, 66 American soldiers had dug earthworks on the island, and 5 British warships carrying over 2,000 men and 70 cannons sat anchored just offshore, guns aimed at the American position. For 13 years, the two empires stared at each other across a few hundred yards of water, building forts, trading polite letters, and occasionally sharing whiskey between enemy lines. Soldiers on both sides grew bored enough to organize joint social events, including a shared celebration of Queen Victoria's birthday, hosted by the same men whose cannons pointed at each other. Not one human being died in the entire standoff. The only fatality of the Pig War was the pig that started it. Western Australia, November 1932. Drought had pushed roughly 20,000 emus inland, straight into wheat farming country, where the birds tore through crops and fences by the thousand. Farmers, many of them veterans of the First World War, asked their government for military help. The government agreed. Major G.P.W. Meredith led the operation, armed with 2 Lewis machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. On the first day, roughly 50 emus were spotted near a dam, and the guns jammed after killing only a handful before the flock scattered out of range. The emus proved faster than expected and harder to kill than anyone had planned for. They scattered into small groups the moment gunfire started, absorbed bullets in their thick feathers without dropping, and outran the trucks sent to chase them across open ground. After a month of operations, government reports confirmed fewer than 1,000 emu deaths. Ammunition expenditure numbered in the thousands of rounds per confirmed kill. An officer covering the campaign for Parliament reportedly compared the emus favorably to enemy machine gunners, noting their ability to absorb fire and keep moving. Australia's military quietly ended the campaign. The press at the time declared the emus the winners of the war. Southern California, February 1942. 10 weeks after Pearl Harbor, air raid sirens sounded across Los Angeles in the middle of the night. Anti-aircraft batteries opened fire on what crews swore was an incoming formation of enemy aircraft. Over 1,400 rounds of artillery shells tore into the night sky above the city. Meechlights swept darkness for hours, crossing and recrossing empty sky while gun crews kept loading and firing at anything that moved, including drifting smoke and their own tracer rounds. Residents reported seeing enemy planes, some reported seeing them shot down, others reported seeing nothing at all. Newspapers the next morning ran conflicting front pages, some declaring a foiled Japanese air raid, others quietly noting that no bombs had ever actually fallen. When the smoke cleared, no wreckage was ever found, no enemy aircraft, no bodies, nothing but falling shrapnel that killed 3 civilians and damaged buildings across the city. The government later attributed the incident to war nerves and a stray weather balloon. The Battle of Los Angeles killed 3 of its own people fighting an enemy that was never there. Austria, May 1945, 5 days before Germany's surrender. A small castle called Itter held a strange collection of French prisoners, including former prime ministers and generals, guarded by a shrinking garrison of German soldiers who no longer believed in the war they were fighting. An SS unit approached to execute the prisoners before Allied forces could arrive. A German army major named Josef Gangl, who had spent 5 years fighting for the Wehrmacht, made contact with an American tank unit nearby and asked for help defending the castle. American Captain Jack Lee agreed. For one day, American soldiers, French prisoners, and German Wehrmacht troops manned the same walls, firing the same direction against the same SS attackers. The defenders held through most of a day of assault before a relief column of American tanks broke through to the castle. Gangl was killed by a sniper defending prisoners his own army had once been ordered to guard as hostages, not allies. The battle ended in an Allied victory hours later. It remains the only recorded battle of the Second World War where American and German soldiers fought side by side, and neither government ever quite knew what to do with that fact. Zanzibar, August 27, 1896. Sultan Hamad bin Thuwaini, favorable to British interests, died suddenly, and his cousin Khalid bin Bargash seized the palace within hours without London's permission. The British consul gave Khalid an ultimatum: stand down by 9 in the morning or face bombardment. Khalid barricaded himself inside with roughly 3,000 armed defenders and a single aging warship. At 9:02 a.m., 3 British cruisers opened fire on the palace and the harbor. The wooden warship, Zanzibar's entire navy, sank within minutes under a hail of high explosive shells, and the palace roof collapsed onto the defenders sheltering beneath it. Khalid escaped out a back door as his own flag came down over the ruins. British forces declared victory at 9:40 a.m., and Royal Navy officers later noted that most of their 38 minutes had been spent putting out fires rather than fighting. The entire war, from first shot to surrender, lasted 38 minutes, the shortest declared war ever recorded. and roughly 500 Zanzibari defenders were killed defending a throne its occupant held for less than 1 day. 8 battles, 5 continents, 6 centuries apart, and not one of them was decided by the thing armies are actually built for. A bucket outlasted an army, a pig outlasted an empire's patience, emus outlasted machine guns, and a sultanate lost its independence in less time than it takes to read the news that morning. Soldiers trained for years, funded by treasuries, armed with the newest weapons their governments could afford, and still lost to darkness, mistaken identity, and animals that never received orders from anyone. History remembers the wars fought with maps and cannons, the ones with named generals and famous quotes carved into monuments. It just as often forgets the ones fought over a bucket, a pig, or nothing at all, the ones where the enemy was invisible or wasn't an enemy in the first place. Those may be the only honest battle plans war has ever produced. Proof that the line between a great power and a panicked crowd with weapons was never as wide as either side liked to believe.